ago, up to Region 1 all the way on the border of Oregon. So that's, two different experiences. And if you guys are interested in getting more involved in either, that's what I hope to teach you today. Thank you.
All right, so a little bit about today's workshop. Don't feel like you have to even read this. I just wanted to give you a little bit of a lowdown of what we'll be going through. Again, subject to how the conversation goes. We'll talk about what advocacy is. This is literally an advocacy academy conference. It's a pretty important thing to know. Why it's important, types of advocacy, finding your cause, and for students, it's incredibly important. Researching your cause, relationships and knowing your audience, and relationships are probably one of the most important parts of advocating for anything. Creating your message, advocacy strategies and communications, and overcoming inevitable obstacles. So this is an icebreaker, literally. If you could have a superpower to help you advocate for a cause, what would it be and how would you use it to make positive change? Annie, you want to talk about it?
Sure, I can talk about it. Oh God, I would like so many things. I think that probably like if I could get other people to more easily understand the system, I think that is so foundational because when people don't understand why it's important to talk to your state assembly, why it's important to go to your board of trustees, why it's important to serve on AS Associated Students, people don't work. Right? They check out. They're probably mad, right, about systemic things. They're probably mad or that they're not a bus program, but they don't understand who decides, right? Who decides how much you get. And so if people could understand so many more of us, right? Think about all of the people that are impacted by decisions that are made in government space. All of them, right, could make so much change. So not sure if that's necessarily a superpower in the traditional, but if
Okay, anyone else? Ruth?
that'd be sure.
Let's do it.
Say after someone know about a cause or advocated to an audience, I would like for them to always something for the cause, or like motivation to activate. They were stating like understanding it or going for themselves to do more knowledge.
I love it. Power of motivation. Anyone else? Yeah, cool. All right, so politics. Poly meaning many, ticks, blood-sucking parasites. I love a good dad joke. Obviously, I don't actually feel that way with politics. But advocacy is the act of publicly supporting, recommending a particular policy, cause, or idea. A huge part of what the Student Senate does is advocacy. We advocate. We're up there in Sacramento. Our office is literally across the street from the Capitol. If you angle your head from where I sit, you can kind of see a sliver of it. Almost. We're right there. We're in the trenches. We are the largest segment of higher education in the state. We're incredibly powerful. And that's why it's so important to get involved, because despite being the largest, despite having 1.8 million students per student, we're still woefully underfunded compared to the UCs and CSUs. We don't receive the support. And to be frank, it's an uphill battle for the legislature teaching new legislators about the community colleges and what they do. You guys want to add anything?
Yeah. I think to kind of tie this into that previous question, I think we're not talking about actual superpowers, but what's a powerful tool that you could learn? What's something that you should focus on honing and just getting really good at, and then how does that translate to being good at advocacy? I would say is just communication. This is kind of what you said, making people understand. And I think when if you can put something on people's radar, you don't have to necessarily get people, actively involved. Advocacy can just be large numbers. They say like a single person with passion is better than 40 who are merely interested. So if you're able to be that person and then communicate to others and just make people merely interested, genuinely, keep them um, in your kind of like Rolodex. A good example of advocacy that we did at my school was we have an environmental club. Um, I founded it, was an unsuccessful recruiter at first, just kept trying, got 3 people that care and put in time out of like maybe 50 or 60 members that have joined our online forum. Um, and then once it comes time, once we say we've got something here, so that's you guys being here, you're those fighters. You're the people that need to get momentum. And then once people are excited about that, that's kind of how you get those larger numbers. That's how you get like what we got a 500 or 600 person email campaign to, and it's just an email, right? You write the script, you write the prompt. That's all you. You're the advocators, you're the driving forces, and then you just communicate its importance and you say, can we just, it's I mean it's the same thing as the voting process, right? Like that's not difficult. So if you guys are able to kind of push and then communicate it to others, just again to make them merely interested, you can get a lot done. And our result of that was we were able to get $15,000 from the administration, change the way that we compost, get our waste diversion rates much better, and it was just from people sending an email that we'd written. And so I think that's how you guys should see your role in advocacy is you guys are the drivers and how many people can you get behind you.
I love that. It's an amazing example of local grassroots advocacy. Now, as you go up and you're looking at statewide advocacy, just thinking of a couple of things we, the Student Senate, have actually worked on in the last couple of years. How many people, if you don't want to, but if you're willing to, how many people here have received or will be receiving Cal Grants? Awesome. I also received them back when I was in college. They were a huge help. For years and years and years, we've been talking about Cal Grant reform. How can we get it to more community college students, make it more useful to our community college students? It's been a huge conversation on the regulatory side, so CSAC. And it's been a huge conversation in the legislature. And a couple of years ago, we were finally able to, we attacked it from 2 directions. There was a bill relating to Cal reform, Assembly, and then there was a budget ask. California is the wealthiest state in the nation. When you talk big money, you're talking California. It's a really, really exciting place to lobby or to advocate, up until recently, because up until recently there was a lot of money. So we were able to get Cal Grant reform adopted in the budget, and that was huge advocacy at the state level, and that support from students on college campuses. It required support in Sacramento. There was a massive coalition, students, faculty, administrators, trustees, outside organizations. And now we're still pushing for it because it weren't fully adopted until something here. So there's stuff coming. So advocacy starts at that grassroots level. It goes up through the state level and, of course, federal level. So as you move forward and you think about see where you want to go through this conference, and that's what, keep that in mind. Where do you want to be after this conference? Why did you come here? Where are you going to go next? Consider all the help we need at the state, all the help we need from students. Things like Cal Grant reform to basic needs. Does anybody else have any examples they want to share of some advocacy they've worked on at either the campus level, city level? I know. Yes.
We actually worked to pass a law that initially the girls in the college district that mirrored the San Diego bill.
Mhm.
It was a super awesome opportunity for us to center and also do demonstration. That bill ended up passing with unanimous bipartisan support. We the students really doing a lot more to implement it, but that was the first policy change, and we've also done a lot of things to raise fees, such as curriculum costs, managing reimbursement students, and a lot of research as well. And then recently, just passed $25,000 for the PTA Smart Pass proposal, which pilots a 6-month program for all students outside of college part-time to get into PTA Smart Pass. completely agree.
Alright, now it's a BTA Smart Pass.
A BTA Smart Pass is the Valley Transportation Authority Smart Pass, and that allows you to get transportation to and from Westmount College, which doesn't just extend or end there. And it's a really awesome opportunity for students who may not have the resources to travel across campuses. And the last thing is we have a shuttle also for us.
That's amazing. That's amazing to hear about. Congratulations. So when you do things like that on your college campus, there are 116 community colleges who are dealing with similar issues. They're going to look to that example and they're going to say, hey, this worked, this didn't work. And things like that are how we can elevate it to the state level and potentially get it across all campuses. So that's amazing work. And I will say open and free transportation is a priority of the Student Senate. It's something we've been fighting for. Chris Holden in the legislature runs a bill every year relating to it, but it's an uphill battle again because of budgets. So cool to hear about that. So we've talked already a lot about this. Why do you advocate? You advocate because you want to see change made. Typically, people see a problem in a region, and they want to make change. Usually, if you're the kind of, do we have any political science majors?
I feel like there's a few more of you.
So usually people choose something like political science or communications because they know that this is an area they want to pursue. But it shouldn't be limited to those students. And I will say, political science tends to be more theoretical. The stuff we do in the Capitol is on the ground. So we advocate to make change, to make our world just a little better. So what's your cause? It's super important that you figure out what your cause is. Some of the things we've worked on over the past couple of years, my kind of specialty, my baby issues for the past 6 years have been basic needs. I've worked on bills relating to housing, transportation, food, and quite a few of them have gotten signed, which is awesome. Cal Grant reform implementation, we've already talked about Cal Grant reform. A bill we're looking at running this year happens to be electronic benefits transfer access, so ET. One thing I want to emphasize, when you do go to advocate for a cause, please remember that not everybody is going to know the acronyms you use. And hopefully they ask, but sometimes they won't, and they'll just forget, and they won't know what you're talking about. So when you go and you meet with legislators, or when you meet with trustees, or when you meet with the administrator, don't assume they know your acronyms. Just say them, include them in emails, write them out. This is something I'm always on about. I got yelled at an acronym, so it happens to all of us, but just try to think about that. Increased transfer readiness. It's been a huge conversation for years with community college students. Is there anybody in here who wants to transfer to a 4-year already has? Exactly. But it's not easy, is it? It's super complicated. We have how many different pathways, UC, CSU. So that's been a massive conversation in the legislature, and everybody disagrees about how to do it. So faculty disagree with other groups, the students disagree. At this point, we've had a bus pass. Currently, the single pathway to make things for a little bit easier.
Talking about one of those, yeah. In terms of why advocate, there was probably 10 years of back work that went into AB 928 of students advocating for how bad the system was to transfer. I don't know how many of you guys are familiar with assist.com if you're planning to transfer, probably a lot of you. So you've got that. I mean, that's a third party source, right? That's kind of insane that the articulation agreements are held there. Then you've got your e-services, whatever that may be, where you've got your grades and the courses you can take, and then you've got your application and what all the schools are requiring. Like that is broken. And then even the classes you're going to take. This STEM majors are getting attention for this now because it's becoming an impacted focus. But essentially our original method, our original transfer model curricula, as they call it, was you have to take about 90 units from the majority of high unit STEM majors, and then you can only transfer 60. You're only bringing 60 of those with you. So students just continue to advocate. I mean, it was just repetition, and it was galvanizing large numbers. It was going to the state capitol. I mean, it was everything. And we finally got a bill. We're now working on how to implement that. And my position just on Student Senate, I'm able to be a part of that committee that the state deemed would be the primary entity in charge of how we're going to implement this. So I'd say two things. Why advocate? One, you bring attention to problems. Two, you put yourself in a position to actually influence. And so, I mean, it's massive. The way that it's being implemented now is now influenced by 4 students that were on that board. They said 5 years ago there was 1. 5 years before that there was 0. So, I would say again, just to reiterate, why advocate? You bring awareness to issues, and you personally put yourselves in positions to influence.
There are decisions being made in Sacramento right now. Do you agree with the conversation? You want to be in that room, right? You want to be engaged. You want to be involved. I worked on AB 928. I actually had the privilege of working on both sides of AB 928. It's when you, it's professionally, you don't always get to do sides. In that one, one side saying they wanted something to, easier transfer, and the other side was basically saying we know better than you, even though you're students. We can't let that happen. Okay, so I want to see every single one of you really take the power you have, students, and make change, because you do have that. Because it's not fair to have other people telling you what's right.
Yeah.
The ones in the trenches. You're the ones going to class every day. You know what you're facing. And to have people in Sacramento who think they know better, we can't let that. We've got to be there. We've got to be there.
Right before we call, I'm going to add, I really like what you just said. I'm going to add just this short maxim to it, which is if you're not at the table, then your rights are what's on the menu. Everyone else is actively taken away from you. So UCs and CSUs have a lot of influence and power. And so when she says there's these 2 conflicting interests, if that's CSUs and UCs, they can both agree, well, then, to hell with the community colleges and their students. So yeah, I appreciate that you said that.
Let's see if you.
Yeah, that was in the state budget, and came out of so the real bit. But it was in his original proposal to add UCLA, may revise Berkeley. Did end up, but follow up with me and I'll double check it on his budget.
With Berkeley, it seems unlikely right now because a large part of the decision is their faculty and their academic senate, who are not in favor. If you ask them, difference in prestige level. Yeah. Well, I would say more their own feeling of pretentiousness within the UC system. So we're better than UC Riverside. So like I would say it's more that. Yeah, which is again, that's just it's what it sounded like coming from the mouth of the UC rep who was on this committee that I was on.
And right, an institution becomes less exclusive when it's endemic, right?
Yeah.
I would offer that
Right.
that's a good thing. I
Right.
posit most of you probably would offer that is a good thing, right? Breaking down these barriers, making sure that our institutions are less exclusive, right? But sometimes, especially with historic and storied institutions that were built on systems of oppression and not inclusion, we'll go with, right? They link prestige and exclusion, and right, perhaps want to have a greater control over selecting who gets
Completely.
there.
Completely.
And so, right, there's this fundamental, right, inclusion on one hand and not on the other. Those are some of them.
Yeah, the UC system as a whole, we call it the 4th branch of government in California. It's, if you read any bill relating to the UC, it says we recommend the UC.
Yeah. Yeah.
Mm.
To reiterate that, they can tell community colleges what to do. When we were drafting the language, we specifically, our recommendations, we had to say, we require that the community colleges do this. We require that the CSUs do this, and we recommend, or we urge, or we hope that the UCs will do this. Yeah, cross our fingers that yeah. Um,
If you don't have a representative for the community college student, the UCs end up making the decision for the community college. I just kind of want to understand like the whole process.
in what domain, I'll ask, like, or in what area? So when you say like, do you mean with?
Screen.
Okay, yeah.
You know, when it comes to Senate,
Mhm.
it comes down to the UCs deciding for us because just even like affordable student housing,
Mhm.
they the UCs have no most and for
Right.
years.
Right. Just I'll say a lot of these issues are separate from the UCs. Like we end up having to kind of barter with the UCs about how many opportunities we get, how many academic rights, more when it comes to curriculum and transfer and acceptance and that kind of thing. I think EBT totally independent of the UCs. Basic needs independent of the UCs. Maybe they've got more sway with the government to allocate them more, but it's less a student wouldn't need to be in that space, and that kind of stuff. That's legislator things. Um, and so it's your job to put yourself into that space, but it's going to be less of a like you could be sitting on that board, and more you need to get people down to the state capitol. It's more like the intersegmental committees is what they call them when it's community college students and UC students in the room with vice chancellor of the community college league and that kind of thing, which is what we were doing with AB 928. So I would just say like this kind of stuff, basic needs, is not as much a battle with the UCs.
But you bring up saying fighting for a couple of years. So people that didn't provide housing. When do sometimes there was money in the budget to provide affordable student housing. Started those grants. We also had, there was a certain kind of loan that was introduced in the state budget a couple of years ago that ended up working out for the community colleges. And that's an example where we do need to be in that room fighting pretty aggressively because we won't see them. CSUs will, the UCs will, they'll argue they need it more than we do. And we know that's not the case. When you're talking about over a third of your students being housing insecure,
Mm-hmm.
possibly more now, I looked at the data this week, but we need that. We need affordable student housing. And that's been a major issue for the Student Senate that they've been fighting for, or faculty have been fighting for it. But that's a great example of something where historically the UCs and the CSUs get their student housing and we're very much overlooked. So
Mm-hmm.
that's why it's so important to make sure all of you are coming to conferences like this. And after this conference, you're engaged, you're working with us, we're moving this along.
In the middle, she's had her hand up for a while. Yep. Sorry, and then
I wanted to ask, first thing we're talking about student housing, how closely do you work with the Wilson Corporation program? And if you're not familiar with it, the Wilson Corporation is a program that we have at West Valley College that isn't created with us, but they make sure that there's a privilege, and we're also working with them to have affordable housing.
not for
State less regional typically. There was one bill that we did support it was regional, but typically we're looking at statewide. So it'll be statewide funding. It'll be this, the budget's proposal's gonna come out in the beginning of January. Calendars, if you're super wonky and you like watching that kind of stuff. And that's the kind of stuff that we track. We'll be in meetings with members of the budget subcommittees. That's when we'll be talking about housing. If we have any money at all in the state of California, but yes. But as far as regional stuff, I think it's great, especially if we can expand it statewide long term. But as an organization, we have to focus ourselves on the state. By virtue.
But that being said, so we focus mainly on the sources that are available to us on the right?
As far as when we're talking about statewide islands.
And then my question is about the building we were talking about relating to signatures. Since the requirement is about city and your graduation point is 50, obviously STEM courses have higher units, we take them to the lab.
Mhm.
But was the requirement because colleges will only accept you if you those students and
Yeah.
those
It's about preparedness was the reason for the way that was. And now it's about where can we pare down? Where is there excess so we can reduce units and still have the students be prepared? So things like having a bridge program that starts 2 or 3 weeks before the summer is something that has been talked about to kind of close that gap. And I'll just let you know if anybody wants to do more research on AB 928, it's like the single most influential bill to how you'll transfer, which is the reason a lot of people are here. You can do it quicker, you can do it more effectively. Again, AB 928. And it's much broader than STEM majors. So it relates to um, re-engaging people who you may know. I mean, we have a tremendous amount of learners that are over the age of 25 that maybe did a few years in community college and then just left. And a lot of them, again, never knew about assist.com. They didn't realize they were 2/3 of the way to a major to being able to transfer. And they just thought this doesn't work. I mean, taking 60, 70 units of STEM and you still have 20 more that could be 2 semesters, like, and they just don't know how close they were to transfer. So it involves that. It involves closing the equity gaps and transfer rates. So it's a really broad bill. I would urge you guys to look at it. Yeah. So when you say that, do you mean that they're not going to go into the UCs and CSUs less prepared now?
for the acceptance rates because I mean things will change off local at the same they were still taking those units.
Yeah, we're just completely changing the curriculum. We're going to make it so that there'd be no reason to take 90 units. It's when you look online, what's the degree for electrical engineering? It's 80 units. What's the degree for computer science? It's 80 units. So if you took 90, great. You love to learn, but it doesn't have anything to do with your transfer eligibility.
Earlier this semester to a UC trip, I was starting to UC most of the alumni were rural. Yeah, and it's Google makes
It's you can't say faculty have
Yeah.
a big
Big.
but there's a lot of stakeholders in these conversations, so you've got to consider administrators, their perspectives, and it also depends on the college. So it's this is law school coming out. It depends. But
Yeah.
having the
Truly. Yeah. Nearly impossible. Any other? I think I saw one more hand, and then we'll resume back to the yes.
For one, go back and then also what has students done
That's a big, complicated question, and I love it. I can approach that in so many ways. First, I think it's important that we understand that community colleges 98, so that means we have constitutional, basically, there are some exceptions, protection. So we will receive, 11% of the education budget. The other 88 point something percent is K-12. And that was always meant when it was passed by the voters, where the argument most people will make is that that was intended to be. So it's the minimum. Many will argue that it's being treated less. So because the community colleges receive that funding, again, you're looking at students now, funding CSU, and I'll say, yeah, so they're still eating exception, they're guaranteed that.
Mhm.
That disregards the fact that you can actually put. Yeah, there's a lot that goes. Beyond that, you know, this is a fight we fight every year in the legislature. We are forever. Part of it is elitism, certain attitudes about the UCs, CSUs. UCs are research institutions. And this is a rant you're going to hear me go on. If you're ever around me any amount of time, you'll hear me talk about it. We have this, we need to teach legislators. Now, we saw Senator Leyva this morning come up and talk about her experiences. She loves community colleges. That's not the norm. That's not the average. A lot of our legislators went to UCs or USC or CSUs, any number of schools. This past election, we had a third of the legislature turn over. California has term limits. That means that we, after 12 years, our folks are not. So you'll spend all this time building relationships, teaching them about community, teaching them about Proposition 88, why we need this funding. They'll become these amazing champions, and then they turn out. And you can, term limits have their good parts, but the first these amazing champions, and then they leave, and then you have to start all over again. And it's kind of what happens. So there are different ways we approach that. We talk about when we go to actually lobby legislators with Republicans, we'll talk about the workforce, how our community colleges educate police officers, our electrician, all that good stuff. We'll also talk about transfer. If our students go on, important it is. We've got this research and data that's come out that says California needs more college graduates for us to continue being on the cutting edge of the economy, for us to continue being one of the largest economies in the world. And in this kind of a situation, preaching to the choir, know how valuable their community is. But we need to bring this to South because they don't know what's going on. Because we're not the biggest, and that's why we're not getting the funding that we need. Even the chancellor's office, right? That's the regulatory body for the community colleges, 1.8 million students, and they have one of the smallest staffs, way smaller than the CSU or the UC. Starting from the top, we're just not getting the support we need. And so that's one of the reasons, we do so many students to advocate and to become empowered.
Oh.
So, good right now.
Yeah. If I were to give you 2 bullet points, one, I would say that's like our number one thing we push for, right? Like everything we need takes money. So that's kind of like step one, and everything else branches from there, right? We need more money for our students' financial aid. We need more money for this. Like that just comes from us. Where colleges are paid by the amount of full-time equivalent students. That's a whole nother thing. There are far less full-time equivalent students for community colleges. Many of them are part-time. If you're taking 8 units, you're not a full-time equivalent student. I think you get very little funding for that if you're in the community college system versus, so that's one discrepancy. Or what's a reason for the discrepancy?
Yeah, our funding formula these days.
Yeah.
So that's a big part of it. Birth certificates, transfers. It's extremely complicated. And some folks argue that it has turned our community colleges into fighting with each other. The winners are becoming bigger winners because they're transferring even more students, and the ones who can't transfer the most, who are perhaps catering to populations with greater need, end up losing out on that because they don't have as many students transferring in it. So that's definitely complicated things.
Yeah. So I'd say that's to address here, are we advocating for it? That's our number one thing, right? Is more money first. The money is means to do things. And since everything we want to do is execute things, we need the money to do that. And then I would just say a barrier to put a legitimate reason behind it, just something for you to consider, is, like you said, the research. That's pretty huge, the amount of research that comes. UCLA, UC Davis are 2 of the best hospitals in the country, right? There's grounding in reality there about the amount of money needed to do research. And so what I would say is, once you all transfer and become a part of that, what's really interesting and what we rarely see is to continue to be an advocate for community colleges. If you get into the UCs or you get into the CSUs and you continue to say, right now you'll have it good. You've got the extra money, you've got the access to research, and to continue to say, right, to advocate within those bodies while you're there in those student governments for community colleges would be very impactful. More impactful than doing it as a community college student. Because ultimately here you're advocating for a group that you're a part of. So if you go on and transfer, I'd urge you to continue to do that. Hmm. Hmm. I mean, there's always the possibility. This is, I mean, again, this is like how grand do you want to go? There's always any person can start a proposition, and get an amount of signatures to have that on it. You know what I mean? Very expensive. Well, I think it's about $5,000.
Yeah, but the
Yeah.
actual getting the
The
signatures.
campaign,
Yeah.
neither here nor there. Campaigns are very expensive.
But if you were to do it at all 116 campuses, we've got 1.8 million students. I think you only need 500,000 signatures to get it on the ballot. Um, right? So it's not that it's, but I'll just say like that when you say like what should we expect from you, it's just advocacy, and then that is an umbrella that includes a million different iterations of what you could do.
And I would also say, right, about advocacy generally, right? Whether it's about budget advocacy in this context or some other advocacy, right? Your elected officials, your state senators, your state assembly members, tends to listen to their constituents a little bit more than right people outside, right? So if you're a student government, right? Most of us are in student government, right? Can build those relationships with your right with your elected officials. Right? If you don't know who they are, Google who is my state, like who is my state assembly member. The first page or the first page that comes up will tell you that information, right? And so if you can start to right build those relationships, communicate to them how important community colleges, how important funding community colleges, how important listening to community college students is, right? That starts to build that base understanding. So then if the SSCCC right comes to them and says, right, will you support this bill? They have those relationships, that understanding, right? But more, right, as the SSCCC, right, we all agree that community colleges should get more funding, right? We don't need to convince the people in this room, right? But we can work together, right, as the SSCCC, right? Passing resolutions at GA, then implementing, advocating for those resolutions, right? If you want to do advocacy within the SSCCC, right, I would say talk to your regional affairs director or your legislative affairs director. Each and every single one of our 10 regions has a regional legislative affairs committee, right? And those are the committees for the SSCCC, right? Reach out to the state legislators that if you have regional priorities, right, run those regional priorities, even if they have statewide impact. In fact, better if they have statewide impact. And so if you want to get involved in the SSCCC, that's a great space to do it. And right, furthermore, right, as right, you can work through your student government too, and build those relationships as constituents. And so I think that those are really practical ways, right, to advocate for our system, right, a system that we all know badly needs advocacy in the state legislature.
Yeah, the way you can do that, just to absolutely right. The way you can do that at a very, very simple level. Seriously, just look up who your representative is. Look up their district office, call their district office, and just say, I'm so and so at this college. You can just to speak to the staffer who works on higher education. That's it. Ask to go meet with them. Ask to have that conversation. It doesn't have to be a big thing. A lot of them meet over Zoom, although I of course always prefer face to face if you can. But seriously, just on that really practical, basic level, that starts the conversation. That lets them know that this is a practical constituents. And it gives us a little bit of a statewide organization. You know, if you're in the Pasadena area, we need to talk to Senator Portantino. Well, here's the student we know is already contacted their staff. They already have a relationship. We get to contact you, work with you, develop it. So literally it's as simple as making that phone for it, so you can have a conversation with them, and you can meet with them.
Yeah, I like that. I was going to say that is the most important, and then putting it in terms of what they care about. When I answered your question, it bothered me. I kept thinking about it because I didn't give an answer. I just said a proposition, which is unlikely to happen, and then said just advocate. Yeah, right. It's a very political answer of me. I would say that, and then putting it in terms that they care about is in terms of getting an educated workforce. So the governor set a goal to have 70% post-secondary credential attainment. So being able to convert on that is major points for a politician. So putting it in those kind of terms, an educated workforce, right? Talking with Republicans, it's more like even we do certificates as a big part of our programs for blue collar work, and then for both parties care about the push for STEM. If you talk to any of them, you could guarantee that they want a highly educated workforce in STEM. Um, and so put it in those kind of terms. Say we are what convert a working age person who's working a non-skilled job because, and I'm sorry, when I say that, that's a term for like, anyone can do it. You don't need training to do it. Working at a fast food restaurant or something like that. Taking someone like that who didn't have an opportunity to immediately go to college out of high school or whatever it is, and then swore it off, and putting them through 2, 3, 4 years of community college and getting them transferred, completely transforming the way that they are a worker in our state. I'd say that's something that politicians are highly interested in. So phrase it in those terms if you do get those Zoom meetings or cups of coffee.
Absolutely. Touched on a few ways. Um, so we've kind of already touched on this. Relationships are tremendously important. If you can, your representative talk to their staff, start that relationship. Coalition building is huge. When SSCCC was working on Cal Grant reform, it was within the realm of coalition. It's not a one group kind of issue at all. I've got David O'Brien in the Chancellor's office in the back. He worked on finance forever when he was with CSAC. We had the campaign for college opportunity. We had the other student groups. We had faculty. I mean, the coalition was massive. And coming into this next year, where we're seeing full implementation of Cal Grant reform, we're already meeting with that coalition again. And it's huge. It's a big group of people. It's a lot of powerful people with powerful relationships. Relationships make all the difference. They can completely change something. So it's important that I'm a millennial. It's physically painful to answer. And yet, I have to. So, just trying to get over that mental hump and just do it.
I like that a little bit about relationship building and just give you some like very practical ways that you can build relationships with your elected officials. This works for your state legislators, city council members, your board of trustees members, depending upon what you're trying to do in the community college system, and also if you want to get involved in the political system outside of the context of advocacy, these things work too, right? So as Stephanie said, pick up the phone, get to know the staff. The staff run the show. So get to know the higher education staff or get to know the legislative affairs director in these offices, in the offices that represent you, right? Ideally, try and get a meeting, try and bring multiple people, right, from that meeting, right? So you can say we're the student government of our college, or we're students at this college. So a meeting's a great way to start to build those relationships, right? Additionally, your elected officials have events, right? Christmas is coming up. A lot of them have Christmas events. A lot of them have had Thanksgiving events, right? Have summer events. I know that not all of us have all of the time, right, or transportation to go to those events, but if you can, that's a great way to start to meet probably their district staff, meet the elected official themselves, meet other community members. So that's another great way. And then, right, these are elected officials at the end of the day. They run campaigns. They have to campaign. So, right, if you've got an elected official that you believe in, or that you want to see elected, you can go volunteer on their campaign, right? Get to know them before they're elected and build that relationship. even before they're elected, and then through this build relationships with other members of the community, build relationships with staff. And so when that time comes, when you need something from them, when you need them to support your bill, when you want them to sponsor a bill, you already know them, kind of, right, can talk to them not as a stranger but as somebody who has built, right, who has built rapport, and somebody who is, right, involved.
Yeah, in a perfect world, you would have you'd be able to text.
Yeah.
That shows that you've gotten over that. Yeah, perfect world. So crafting your message. Anytime you're advocating, literally, you need to have something that's effective, it needs to be persuasive. We talk a lot about elevator speeches, this ability to basically summarize a bill in the time it would take an elevator to go from the first floor to the sixth floor or whatever. So it's really, really important to think about how you want to do this. And that's kind of goes back to knowing your audience. The way you're going to sell an issue is going to be very different to a Republican member versus a Democrat. It's going to be different if you're talking to Congress versus your states, city council versus, your district. So that's just something that's a strategy issue. As Student Senate works on it, we have toolkits for our different issues, and that helps us craft our message. So you'll see on our Instagram, Twitter feed, we have very specific language we use on issues, and it's often that way for a reason. Few things are, at least if I have the opportunity to edit things properly, nothing's accidental. Just keep that in mind. So in an ideal world, you're going to meet with your representatives. You're going to meet with your state senators, assembly members, interested in federal. Going back to what Annie was saying, this is actually a pretty good time of year to try to meet with folks because they're usually
The legislature is off session and off session till January. So this is a great time to, if you're trying to get a meeting with the elected themselves, they're probably back in the district now, meeting with constituents if they've got a campaign to run, probably starting or continuing to campaign. So this is a really good time of year. And then the other really good time of year, it's super unfortunate for us as college students, but is summer. When they go on summer recess, those are really good times to try and meet with the member themselves. It'll be a little bit easier to reach if Sacramento's real far from their district office. And then I had one more thing that I remember as soon as I was done talking about trying to build relationships. Most, if not all, of your elected officials, especially your state elected officials, have an email distribution list or a text distribution list. So once a month or every few weeks, you'll get an email with the events that they're doing, what they've accomplished, what they're up to. That tells you really good ways to meet them if they're having a coffee chat to meet constituents, or if they're hosting a Thanksgiving or a Christmas Day event. Right, so you kind of know where they are, and it makes it easier to connect with.
Yeah, like you think of it like this way. They are around schmoozing, as they call it. It's a matter of finding out where, which really isn't that hard. If you go on their website, or you just kind of get in touch with they often meet with labor unions, and they have food socials and that kinds of things. There was an event I went to for the Stonewall Foundation, it was just filled with trustees and politicians just there interacting with people, open to the public. So yeah, really look into it, especially during these times that Annie was talking about. Yeah.
So you mentioned
So that's what I'm going to talk about. So when you actually get those meetings, when I say icebreaker, I don't mean how would you describe yourself? I mean, try to find some commonalities that you may have. So I like to stop. Read their bio, commonalities. Say, oh, you went to McGeorge. Oh, you too. Whatever. And just use that as a way to start the conversation. And that'll help relax you if you're kind of on a comfortable footing. And it also lets them know that you're a human, you're just there for business. Just typically, if you're getting into elected politics, it's because you like people. So people. When I say start with a solution, then introduce a problem, when somebody comes up to you and starts whining about something, do you usually have a pretty positive reaction, or it's mildly annoying? Why am I? But if you come up to someone and you say, I'm proposing that we construct affordable housing in this city of Rockland for Sierra College to address using this amount of money to address the homeless population. You've kind of proposed, you have a solution in there, and then you follow up. So you're not just coming to them saying, hey, I've got this problem, solve it for me, bro. You're actually coming to them with a proposed solution. Will it be the final solution? Will it be the final answer? No, of course not. It's going to go through many iterations. But the point is, you've thought about this, and you're coming to them with a good idea. You follow it up with a problem, you explain that, and they're kind of on board, and hopefully they're going along with your solution. One of the most powerful things you can do as a student when you're meeting legislators is tell your personal story. Because that's the persuasive. Data's great, and you should always follow up with data, and there's some people, some legislators in particular, who are very, very swayed by data, but that's not what pulls on their heartstrings or makes them want to go make a great speech on the floor. It's going to be your story, the way your parents or you immigrated here, the way, you know, you were just as involved, but now you're getting money, or something that really inspires. Even the most mundane person probably has some interesting stories.
Mm-hmm.
So think about that. Think about how you can really sway them. Chances are, if you've gotten to the point where you want to advocate for something, it's because you faced some kind of a hardship. Talk to them about that. Share what you're comfortable sharing. And then you'll follow up with data. This many students are food insecure, housing insecure, dream of having this issue, whatever it is. And then backs it up. And then you have a closing. And that's where you want to repeat your solution again. You want them to walk out with them saying, hey, we've got a solution. This is great.
With the data, I'd also say work with it. Do a lot of research and then kind of mold it into something interesting, right? Turn it from like that quantitative numbers and percentages to something qualitative, interesting, like, and then just kind of use it as a quip. You can just like a third of community college students facing homelessness, like suffering from housing insecurity, almost half having food insecurity. That's quick, right? You say almost a third of community college students are facing homelessness. I mean, that's just right. That's how you convert data into something that is that elevator speech. Like Bernie Sanders has, right, like the 1% control over 50% of the wealth. Right? It's like those quick little that stick in your mind. I'd say work with that, and it requires a lot of research on your end. And then once you're going to get that 2-minute window where they'll decide if you're interesting or not. Ultimately, like they are people, and they have to campaign, but they're right. It's just the same. It's not like they're not still interacting with you as a person, right? There's people you find interesting. There's people that you want to maintain a relationship with, and then there's ones that you do so because that's what's professional. So if you can have that actual relationship, huge difference from they get that call and they're like, God damn, like you know what I mean? It's like, can you be aware of that line? Make yourself an interesting person and make what you say interesting, and that just takes a lot of work ahead of time. Don't just get in there and ramble.
And then after the meeting, send a thank you. It's always nice. Just a quick little note as a follow up. If you're meeting with a staffer, I recommend an email. They'll respond back to you. If you're meeting with the legislator, you can do email or an actual physical meeting. So, and then one thing we often do is we'll have just a one pager with the data for whatever you're trying to promote on it. Leave that behind. How effective that is nowadays, I'm not sure, because they end up with a pile of paper. They don't know how much people actually look at it. But depends on the office. Some might find it really effective. And then this we've already talked about. Tell your story. You all have stories. You're all getting an education. You're all in community colleges. Just tell your story. Strategy. Now, for the legislative priorities that the Student Senate is promoting, we are developing strategies. We can't help with that. If you're coming out of, you've got a different issue you're working on, really think about how you want to address it, come up with a strategy. Typically, what you want to look at if you're doing something at the state level is what committee is your issue likely to come up in? Is it going to be environmental, higher education? Look at the members who are sitting on that committee, start contacting their offices, and just know how to follow that along. So strategy is clearly extremely important, but like I said, for our issues, legislative priorities we'll be putting out, we can help on this.
So have a 10-minute warning.
You're going to face obstacles. You're going to face so many obstacles. Bills fail. Bills fail in appropriation. That means that the legislature is deems them too expensive to continue officially. A lot of bills fail in appropriations not because they're actually too expensive, because there's some other political reason they don't want it to pass. And that's a really easy way for them to kill it without there being too much blood. You may have to bring up a bill again and again and again. One bill we ran this year, 1451, had to do with requiring trustee boards to give their student trustees advisory votes. That is not the first time we've run that bill. Student Senate's run that several times over. Each time up until now, it's failed for one reason or another. We've had to change it, revolve it. We finally got it passed. I'm going to be honest, advisory vote was not our original goal. We wanted our student trustees to have a full vote. We also wanted to get them to get some form of pay. You have to look at what you're dealing with realistically, and we were dealing with a not good budget this past year. I suspect it's not going to be great next year. So we had to turn it down. We also had to look at how realistic it was to get a full vote coming right out of the gates. We weren't able to do that, starting with an advisory vote. Our hope is that that's just the first step. We will be able to kind of grow this idea and get our trustees to have an influential spot in their boards. But you have to start.
And sometimes work within your own district. My district does the advisory vote and pays the student trustee. And that was just done by students within the district. So you don't always need to take it statewide. Sometimes it can be easier to work within your own. And yeah, I would say consolidate, focus on what you think is really important. The amount of asks and requests, I mean, just think of all the different topics and names of workshops that we've, offered at this. Think of the different initiatives you have at your schools versus the 5 legislative priorities, we set in each region, and then the one statewide for SSCCC. It's just, do what you can to see what's already in motion, what you can align yourself with and support, and then how can you kind of consolidate things to make less requests and more powerful requests.
Yeah, just because something's not politically feasible at the state quite yet doesn't mean that it can't start to happen. Some of our community college districts, I'll be honest, are quite conservative, and they move only when the state forces them to on certain things. Other of our districts, especially in certain areas, are very, very progressive and are interested in expanding the rights and more and franchising students more. We're interested in pushing on this DEIA. And so especially if you're in one of those districts, and the districts that pride itself on being a leader, on being progressive, on listening to students, even if we can't pass the policy at the statewide, you might be able to pass it in your district. And then when one district does it, it makes it easier for the next district, and then the third district, and the fourth district. And so that's a way that we can start to permeate policy. And then when a lot of districts are doing something, it makes it easier to then run it at the state level. And we can look at what has happened in the districts that have already passed it, look at concrete examples in our system that say, look, this policy works, this policy is beneficial. And so going to one of those institutions, you have a little bit easier time working with your trustees, working on all of our past bills, speaking of stuff at the statewide level, right? So I would really encourage you to see what's possible in your district, and that can inspire stuff a few years down the road at the state level.
Yeah, I want to remind you, the things you do today in your community colleges probably won't impact you, but they will impact the next many classes of community college students. So just remember, you may not be able to do things for you, may not help you at this moment, but it will help in the future. It's incredibly important. We do want to open this up for Q&A. It's questions.
One of my questions is, when I work for here, that is to you see your course, you take on the responsibility of people activities or should be directly report or boyfriend or how things can do for the
That's a good question. So the other segments have their student groups and family or transfer students represented at UCSA for the UC and CSFA for the state. So that would be one way. So you do have that. The other way is to, talk to the people who are kind of coming into your positions. You're on the board. Communicate with them.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah, I'll say in that committee I was talking about how they established the intersegmental, how that'll translate to, like the representatives from community colleges, California state universities, and universities of California. We had two students that had transferred represented, so they're doing the right thing. Their voice was huge on that board. And so any of you who do the same, continue student government where you are, represent yourself as a transfer student, and continue to fight for community college students, because there's plenty of people fighting for the UCs and the amount of funding there. You'll find a whole other slew of challenges once you get to UCs of there's not enough student housing there either. But yeah, you'll have an interesting perspective. So I'd urge you to continue your role in leadership, because it's more valuable with your breadth of perspective.
Stay in student government as a transfer student. If you go to the CSU or the UC, you have that experience. It can be super effective because of that experience. Let's see. Rhea, go ahead.
I'd say one, like if you want all of it, like the dense stuff, go online. They post all of these bills, and you'll be able to find a link to anything just by Googling the bill, AB, whatever it is, or SB if it's a Senate bill, and then you can find the entire thing. You can see new ones that are on the floor. Like, this is all available to you online. And then if you want summaries and things like that, you can usually find, there are specific newsletters that are dedicated. They're all Sacramento based. They do them on social media now too. Find accounts on Instagram or X. Whatever it is, you know what I mean? Just find things like that. It puts it bite-sized. It keeps it in your daily information. What you fill up with daily is kind of what will be on your mind, what you'll be heavily, seriously educated about.
And then that
Community matrix, they call it. Some stuff. It's the Association of the California Community Colleges. Check the websites of the stakeholders.
Sorry, no worries. I also have an SSCCC specific answer. Right? Who here goes to a college that has a delegate to the SSCCC? Most of you. So, right, each month at the delegate assembly, the legislative affairs director for the region, right? So me for region 4, Jay for region 2, will give a legislative update on the SSCCC priority bill. So not everything, but the SSCCC bills, right? The delegate, they're there, they hear them. So then at your student government, right, you can agendize your delegate report out So your delegate can go and report about what
Mhm.
happens at the delegate assembly. And so they can report out about the prognosis of legislation, if it failed, if it got signed, if it's stuck in a probes again this month. And so that's a way to really, right here, down the chain, about what the SSCCC is working on, right, really materially through those delegates. That's one of the jobs of the delegate, is to serve as a bridge between the statewide organization and all of your local ASBs. Right? And if your ASB has a priority, right, it can go up the chain too. Your delegate can come and communicate that to the delegate assembly. And then guess what? The region can potentially take a position on it. I know my region already has taken positions on certain things because one college brought it up, it was a problem. And we all as a region wanted to support that college. And then we decided we wanted to fix it in a systemic manner. Right? So really lean on those delegates, especially in SSCCC.
Yeah, that was a much better answer than mine. Actually focus on SSCCC. Join our newsletter.
Yes, also join
Yeah,
our
because
newsletter.
then you'll figure out whenever whenever we're holding meetings like Legislative Affairs Committee, you can join yourself as a member of the public. You'll get a rundown, like Annie said, on all the rest of it. Yeah. So join our newsletter. You get that just by Googling ssccc.org. And yeah,
I'm sure there'll be like
Scroll
3 pop-ups
yeah,
asking you to
yeah,
join
yeah.
the newsletter.
Scroll
We're very precise.
scroll to the bottom, put in your email. You'll get notified from any meeting that we have, and specifically focus on the ones that are Legislative Affairs Committee.
So tomorrow we're going to be focusing on next steps. What we want to do at this conference, what your intentions are. So I want everybody in this room to kind of think about, where do you want to go? Where do you want to take it? How do you want to use this? Do you want to better your school, your state? We'll be working on that tomorrow during the General Assembly. Anytime, you're all free. Thank you so much.